Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Jonesboro. Today we have Dr. Shane Speights. He's the Dean of NYIT and he's also the City Medical Director. Dr. Speights, you've been good with us for all this time during a very odd and unusual year. We are entering a new phase of this odd and unusual year with COVID-19. And can you tell us where we stand here and what we are supposed to make of it?
First of all, thank you, Bill, for having me. I'm always happy to speak to you and speak to the citizens of the city and of this region and try to pass along the latest information that we have. I know it can be frustrating sometimes. The data really changes almost daily, and we get new research that comes in from all over the country and all around the world. We're trying to interpret that data so that we can provide the best information for the general population and for the citizens of this city and of this region. So what we're seeing now, just globally, it's just kind of ups and downs. There are some countries that are starting to reopen, and some of them are seeing an increase in cases as they do that. Some of them are not. It just depends on how that works. One of the things I want people to know is that when you hear about reopening, like in another country, like specifically over like Italy or France or Germany, they were under different requirements. When they had to stay at home, they had to stay at home. So reopening in Italy means that now you can travel like 400 feet outside your home. I mean, it's really restrictive in terms of what reopening means there. Here in the United States, reopening just differs based on which state you live in. Of course, here in the state of Arkansas, the governor's announced that we're going to enter into phase 2 on Monday. So what does that really mean for us? Well, by and large, that increases the capacity of restaurants and some of our businesses. So historically, when we were in phase 1, about 33% was the capacity of most of these restaurants and businesses. That will now move to 66%. We expect the actual guidance to come out late Friday evening in terms of the details of it, but it doesn't surprise me, or wouldn't surprise me, if they continue to have, the mask wearing, the hand washing, staying 6 feet or more apart from individuals. Certainly, I see that they'll maintain the 6 foot distance in restaurants and places of business and things like that. Some of this won't be new, but I mean, hopefully it will allow for our restaurants to have some more capacity and have more individuals there. One of the things I think that also we need to remember, we can go through phases back and forth, but we're talking about a pretty unpredictable virus and kind of almost an event of nature. And when we try to put nature into a protocol or put nature into a box, it doesn't always work out for us. And so, what's going to happen is what's going to happen. And a lot of this falls back to individual responsibility. And there's rare cases where the individual can make such an impact over a community. And what I mean by that is if you've got somebody who just, maybe they're sick and don't know it, and they decide they're not going to wear a mask, and they're going to go to the grocery store or a local market or something like that, and they spread it around. There's cases of that already where that can spread, and all of a sudden now you have lots more infections, and even some deaths can be associated with that. And so it's, we've never really had that happen in our country, or even, globally to a large extent. And so this is new for everybody. So those are kind of the words of caution that I would kind of throw in there as we move into this next phase.
And we're dealing with a pandemic that hasn't led to a lot of deaths in our region. So we've got people with opinions all over the place. There are those who are extra cautious. There are those who are not cautious at all. And all have, arguments that are in many cases reasonable for their opinions. That makes it even more difficult for us to get the appropriate message out and convince people of what they're dealing with. And as you've learned over the course of about 3 months or more, maybe 4, through this, what thoughts do you have, and how has your opinion mutated, if I can use that word?
I'm hesitant to use the word mutated because people jump to the virus, and there have been some slight mutations, though nothing that makes it more deadly or less deadly to this point. I think it's important, and I recognize your initial comment when you said, people are on kind of almost 2 ends of the fence. And I try to specifically speak to the data and speak to the data in terms of what we know, what we don't know, and what we're learning, and what we think based on the data that's come out, and what we can look at historically in terms of what we've seen in the past and how viruses work. What we know right now is here in the state of Arkansas, about 78% of the people that have been infected with this virus are between the ages of 18 and 64. So the vast majority are between the ages of 18 and 64. So only about 13% of those that are really at a high risk group, which means over the age of 65, so 65 and older, about 13% of those individuals have been positive. But over 72% of our deaths have occurred in that age group of 65 and older. So we know that it's still a significant, deadly, and difficult disease to manage in our older population. And those are really the at-risk ones. And we're seeing that not just in Arkansas, but when you look at the data in Texas or look at the data in Florida, the numbers are about the same. I think in Florida it's about 80%, and in Texas it's about 72%. So that's consistent for a couple of other states that when I pulled the data and looked at it. So we know who the vulnerable populations are, and we know who's at higher risk of having a bad outcome from this. I think that will help guide us as we move forward in terms of, how we manage this disease and how we individually make decisions and make choices, around our older population, whether it be parents and grandparents or teachers or, whoever it may be, bus drivers, what have you. And so I think those are important things to remember and important things to note.
So there are it's safe to say that probably our senior population is doing a pretty good job at this juncture.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think for the most part, I think they've heeded a lot of the warnings. The other thing that I think people need to realize, certainly in the state of Arkansas, when you look at the total number of cases that we have in the state of Arkansas, it represents about 0.3% of the whole population of the state. So 0.3%. So even if we're off, let's say we're off by 10 times, then that only means that 3% of the population of our state has been infected. That's an extremely small percentage that's been infected by this virus at this point. And remember, it's a new virus. So everybody eventually has to either get infected or get the vaccine. And so that's kind of where we are. And that's our biggest concern as we move into the fall, when things get colder and when people are more inside.
So, and that's another thing that I want to ask about, that we've talked about another spike or another round in the fall. Based on what we've seen in Latin countries that are already at 100-degree temperatures, do we truly expect a dip, or are we seeing an even higher spike?
It's kind of, I'll say this, we've changed our patterns. And what I mean by that is we've changed how we congregate. If everything stayed the same, if nobody changed anything between what they did from March through the entire summer, then you might have a better idea of really what the seasons do to it and really what it does in the summer. But we've done so much change in terms of, now we've opened up this and we've opened up that and people are moving around. And everybody expected, by the way, as soon as we started opening things back up, it was just natural to know that we'll see some increase in cases. We weren't sure how high those cases would go, but it's just expected because it's a virus that spreads from person to person. So naturally, if you have more people coming together, you're going to spread the virus more. We weren't sure how bad that would be or how high those numbers would be, and we're still not sure. We do in the summertime expect the numbers to kind of plateau off and even dip a little bit just because people are outside. The virus doesn't spread as well when it's outside. It doesn't spread well when it's sunny. It doesn't spread well in very hot weather. That brings us back to the concern for the fall. And this is something that was talked about early on, which was the Spanish influenza of 1918. And that's what was seen back then. Was it first kind of reared its ugly head in late spring. And then it kind of smoldered for a while in the summer, and you had some cases, but it wasn't bad. And then in October of 1918, it came back with a vengeance, and that was by far the highest number of infections and number of deaths that occurred throughout that period. And so that's really what we're concerned with. And most of the people that are watching this data tend to be leaning toward the fact that we're probably going to see a pretty rough winter ahead of us, especially in the fact that we don't expect a vaccine until early 2021.
So we've got to, I guess, people, you talked about the wear out factor, the emotional, the I'm fed up with it factor. You talked about this long before we even reacted to it. I think this is something that you tried to warn people about and warn us about. Is there a compromise that we can do? I mean, what have we learned? We know we're hearing that wearing masks are good, but there's a lot of misinformation out there. Is there any misinformation that you're concerned about? And then what advice do you have for people going forward?
Well, and you've already kind of touched on this. The pandemic fatigue is a real problem. I've read several articles. One most recently said America has given up on the pandemic, but the virus hasn't given up on us. And I think that pretty much says a lot of it. I think that, even though, me, myself, and my family, we're tired of this. We'd much rather be hanging out with friends and, going to the, to the lakes and getting together with family and that sort of thing. But we just can't do it. And it's hard. And as this goes on, it gets harder and harder. So, me and my family, we're not immune to it either. We're tired of it too. But it doesn't change the science. It doesn't at all. And I think that's probably one of the frustrating things. And I have said this before, if I'm sitting on my back porch and, I really wish I had 3 more hours of sunlight because I got some yard work I need to do. Well, as much as I want 3 more hours of sunlight, I'm probably not going to get it. The sun's going to set when it's supposed to set. And that's just based on science. We know how it works. This is kind of the same way. It is what it is. And so there are things you can do to reduce your risk and reduce your family's risk of getting infected. The hand washing, the alcohol-based hand sanitizers, wearing a mask in public is a big deal. I hate that it's become so political. It shouldn't be. It's just basic infection control. And that's kind of where we are right now, to try to keep each other safe and try to keep our family safe. And at the end of the day, I think that's what everybody wants to do.
I think it is too. And is there anything else that I've left out? I know you study this constantly, as well as educated and take care of people. So is there anything else that really needs to be said right now?
As hard as it is, I hope people can be patient. And, as we get new data, this is still a brand new virus for us in science. And so we're still learning about it and trying to figure out who's really at risk and, what do we need to do to protect that group? And, do kids really spread it as much as we thought? This is all stuff that we're still learning. And so I hope people can be patient, and it may look like that we shift gears sometimes. Well, if the data shifts gears on us, then we have to shift gears too. And it's not that we were trying to produce misinformation. It's just you have to follow the data and you have to follow the research. And so we try to do the best that we can to look at good research and good data, to make good decisions and to educate the public when we can. And so we'll continue doing that throughout the summer and certainly into the fall as we follow this pandemic, because it's not going anywhere anytime soon. We're probably going to see this for another 12, 18 months or longer. And I know, gosh, that almost pains me to say it because, again, I'm tired of it just like everybody else. But I've still got a job to do in terms of protecting myself and my family. That's why you'll see me with a mask out in public.
And we at the City of Jonesboro thank you for all that you do for Jonesboro and Northeast Arkansas and everybody that you take care of. And I know you've got to get back to work. I've got to get back to carpool karaoke. So I hope you have a great day, and everybody please take heed to what Dr. Speights is telling us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bill. Have a good day.